Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Mary Ann Monteleone, Vice President of Professional Development for the Long Island Board of Realtors. We have a very special guest here with us today as we wind up with our April Fair Housing Month celebration. Each Wednesday was dedicated to fair housing and education and information about a very important subject. And John Goodman is our final speaker for April. I will tell you before I read the formal introduction that I participated on a National Education Director Zoom call and everybody raved about him. So I was quick to get him for our Wrap Up Wednesday, and I'd like to introduce him and welcome him. So,
thank you, Mary. Oh, thank you,
yes,
Mary Ann.
yes.
So
go ahead. Go ahead. Can I'll introduce you or?
No, that's good. Was that the introduction or?
Well, I have your formal. Should I give the formal?
That's good enough. That's good.
Okay. All right. So I turn it over to you. Thanks, John.
Okay. Thank you, Mary Ann. So I'm here to build up to an action item. I do have an action item that I am building up to, but I will start out by telling you some stories, some anecdotes to build up to this action item. And the way we're going to work here is we want to try and simulate the interactivity that we would naturally have in a live in-person class. So if you have questions, we want them. The way you will ask your questions is not by unmuting and asking, but just in the chat, use the chat to send your question to Mary Ann. Mary Ann will serve as a moderator and ask me the questions as appropriate. And Mary Ann, I talked about this. After I finish each anecdote, she may ask me questions if she has any. All right, here we go. Here's the first one. I love telling this story because in telling this story, I get to brag about my son. My son is now 31 years old, but this story took place in about 2012. And part of the bragging about my son is it's about my son who got into Northwestern University. Now I know there are very fine universities on the East Coast and the like, and I know that Northwestern University is fairly well known, but for those of you who don't know Northwestern, it's important to have a little context about it. Northwestern is a world-class research university. And in addition, it has outstanding professional programs and things like performing arts and journalism and the law school and the business school, for example. But in addition to being outstanding in academics, it is also outstanding in athletics, or at least it has been over the last 20 years or so, including its football program, which routinely competes for the Big Ten, what we used to call the Big Ten championship, routinely competes to be in the Rose Bowl, is in the Rose Bowl a lot. And most football programs across the country would proud to have a football program as strong as the Northwestern program. So here's what happens. In around 2012, my son gets admitted into Northwestern University. And the university has an event for admitted matriculating freshmen in suburban Denver. Now, I happen to live in Boulder, and this location in Denver is on the other side of Denver from where I live. And it's about an hour drive there. And I don't really want to go. I just have a bad attitude about the whole thing. But my wife wants to go and my son wants to go, and I whine a little bit, but then my wife issues a performance command. I gotta go. So we get in the car. The plan was I was supposed to nap. She was driving. And maybe I'd feel better after a nap when I got there. But that didn't happen. I didn't nap. I didn't feel better. I got out of the car. We arrived at this event in suburban Denver after an hour's drive, and I'm in even a worse mode. And there's these kids there having fun, and their parents, and everybody's happy, and they're showing off. And I'm standing over on the side, sulking, watching everybody have fun. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do to kill time over this hour and a half? So what I do is I see the kids talking with each other, this group of 12 kids. And I look at them and I start making these instant snap judgments about these kids. So for example, I see one kid and he's very preppy looking, clean cut, dressed in a very preppy way, very gregarious, interacting with everybody else. And so my snap judgment about this kid is he's going to get way too involved in fraternity life, and he's going to stay up too late, and he's going to drink too much, and he's not even going to make it through his second semester at Northwestern. So remember, I'm in a bad mood. These are very judgy snap judgments. Okay, next kid. This kid is a big kid. I look at him and he's kind of athletic looking, and I say, okay, this guy, he's a football player. He's a football player. And what's going to happen with him is he was probably a high school star as an athlete, but he's going to run into very stiff competition in big time Division I college athletics. And he's going to get hurt in practice and never see a down of varsity Division I football in his career. One more. Promise you, I just got one more for you. The next kid, I see this kid, he's kind of scraggly, not clean shaven, not especially gregarious. He's not part of the crowd. I say, okay, this guy is going to fall in with the card playing crowd. He's going to play bridge and smoke cigarettes and drink too much caffeine and stay up too late. And he's not going to have the discipline for the rigorous world-class university. And he'll drop out by his third semester. All right, now I will save you from the other summaries I've got. But the point is I go through all 12 kids, I go through some, judgy analysis of them like that. I look down in my watch and, I've probably killed 4 minutes of time, 20 seconds in evaluation. And I think, shoot me. What am I going to do? What am I going to do to avoid being bored out of my mind at this event? So what I do is I go back to the kid who was the football player. And I say, okay, he's a football player. What position is he going to play? Go, wide receiver. But then I look at him more closely. No, he's got a gut on him. A gut, a gut, like a man gut on him, a 40-year-old man gut on him. And I think, no, these wide receivers are speedy. He's got enough height for it, but no. So what else could he play on the football team? Who has guts on the football team? The linemen do. The linemen have guts. So I think, okay, yeah, that's right. He's an offensive lineman. He's a defensive lineman. But I know a little bit about Division I football. And Division I linemen are not big men. They are mountains. They have either all of the following features or at least one of the following features. They weigh about 260, 270 pounds or more. They're at least 6'3", and maybe they have the wingspan of somebody who's 6'4" or 6'5". He doesn't have any of these features. This guy's a big guy compared to my son. Most of you don't know me, but this guy is a big guy compared to my son, who's 5'7". But I look at this guy, and he's lucky if he's 5'11". He's lucky if he's 5'11". He's probably about 5'10", 210 pounds. There's no way he's an offensive lineman. And I try and slot him into other roles on the football team, but he doesn't fit any of them. And so then I start thinking to myself, how could I have been so wrong about guessing that this guy was on the football team? How could I have been so wrong about guessing that this guy was on the football team? Now, this is where the Zoom environment fails us a little bit. I would like you to use your chat, and that's not just a rhetorical question. I would like you to use your chat and respond to Marianne. To this question, what have I not told you about this kid who I thought was a football player? What have I not told you about this kid who I thought was a football player that might have made me think he was an athlete? And then we'll let Mary chime in with the answer that she thinks I'm looking for.
Well, we have the Q&A open and everybody's typing in race.
Right. What I haven't told you about is this kid's race. And nobody will be surprised. The context of this class is this kid was a Black kid. And so that helped make the time pass very quickly then for this event, because I had to think of how could I have made such a bad mistake? And then of course, this is something that happened about 8 years ago. And so I've had a lot of time to think about it since. And the best I can do is come up with 3 explanations, 3 possible explanations. Okay, one possible explanation is I just made a mistake. It's possible, I just made a mistake. That's one. Another possible explanation is that in my head, there is this association, which probably is not an ideal association, but not the worst thing in the world, perhaps, is an association between young Black men and athleticism. So it's possible that's the mistake. But then, of course, there's a third possibility. And the third possibility is that this Black kid would not have been able to get into the world-class university of Northwestern without a boost due to his athleticism. Now, I don't know what the answer is, because this is all happening in my brain at a subconscious level. I don't know what the answer is, but that is sort of what implicit association and implicit bias explores. And the reason I start out with this story about myself is what I'm trying to do in this presentation is to create a no shame environment about talking about these things. I don't have any shame or embarrassment telling this story, because whatever was going on in my brain was happening at a level below which I was aware of. It's happening at a subconscious level due to things that I've been exposed to as a kid growing up. We all have these things, and I'm trying to create a no shame environment first for ourselves, because most of us who think about these things, and let's acknowledge that this group of attendees who are voluntarily attending this class are self-selected people who are sort of hip to these kind of notions. You shouldn't feel any shame in thinking about these things. There's ways you can read about it. If you have these concerns about yourself, you're not unusual. That's number one. I also think that this is probably a group of people who are trying to make the world a better place. And part of the way we make the world a better place is by trying to nudge people in the right direction or pull them in the right direction. But it's important that we try and do so in a non-judgmental, non-shamey kind of way. There's one other thing that I'd like to say that is somewhat controversial, but I think it's important to get out there. As I'm standing there off to the side making these judgments, there are no consequences to the judgments I was making at that moment. For example, I was not considering whether to hire this person for a job. I was not charged, I did not have a job of maintaining peace in our society, and I didn't have a gun on my waist. And the reason I bring that up is that when you read about the science of this stuff, everybody has these implicit associations. It's part of how we've evolved. It's part of how we're engineered. And Asian people have associations about Asian people, and Black people have associations about Black people, and gay people have associations about gay people, and none of us are perfect. And so we should also we should also give grace to people who have to make decisions quickly. I'm not talking about keeping a knee on somebody's neck for 9 minutes, but I don't know if I would be any better at making these decisions quickly than anybody else. All right, let me pause right there. That's the end of the first story. Marianne, are you seeing anything you care to ask me about?
And just some comments, supporting what you're saying. It says, that's why you never judge a book by its cover. I am Black, and I never once thought you were talking about a Black kid. Just some comments, that's it.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, thank you. All right, so let's move on to the next topic. This is not really an anecdote. This is something I've read about. I've read about it in different sources, so there's a decent chance it's true. What I understand is that up until the early 1970s, in major metropolitan orchestras in the United States, about 90% of the instrumentalists, we're talking about tuba players and French horn players and clarinetists and violin players, et cetera, 90% were men, 10% were women. And my understanding, I don't know, I don't have personal knowledge of this. I was about 12, 13 years old at the time. My understanding is that nobody had any concern that that imbalance was due to any sexism. It was just presumed that men were better at playing musical instruments than women. But then something happened in the early 1970s. My understanding is that orchestras started auditioning instrumentalists behind a curtain. In other words, the people who were making the decisions could only hear the musicians play, they couldn't see them. And my understanding is that once that was implemented, oh, and by the way, that curtain system, that blind audition process, as I said, was not put into place because of any concern about discrimination. It was put in place, well, I shouldn't say that. It wasn't put in place for any concern about sexism. It was put in place because of concern that the auditioners, the decision makers, were biased in favor of students from certain elite instructors. So they were trying to screen that out. So once that system came into place, as the decades rolled on, my understanding is that the imbalance has shifted to about 60% men, 40% women. 60% men, 40% women. And that is an example of us recognizing that we all have these associations, we have these implicit biases. One of the ways we can deal with them is screen ourselves as much as possible from the effects of subconscious bias by trying not to be aware of things that might trigger our subconscious bias. So I'm pausing there. Marianne, any comments, questions that are worth sharing before I move on to the next one? You're muted.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. We're good. We're good.
We're good. All right. Fantastic. Okay. Yes. All right. I'll keep rolling. All right. Let me talk about privilege a little bit. So none of you know me, but everybody who knows me now as an adult, really everybody who knows me from high school on, thinks of me as kind of a nerd, hard-driving, studious, persnickety, overachiever kind of person. And if that's how they perceive me, they are accurate. But before high school, I was a little bit different. I was a bit of a slacker, underachiever kind of person. And I was kind of proud on it. I read this term recently. In modern lingo, we would say, before high school, my focus was on return on time. I was trying to get the highest return on my time. And if it was more efficient to get a B+ in a class, that was fine with me. I didn't care about getting an A in the class. All right, so with that context, this happens, this story I'm telling you happens when I'm in third grade. Slacker John, much to the disappointment and chagrin of his parents, underachieving John, I come home one day from school because I had just received the results, some test results from a national test that me and my third grade classmates had taken. And the score on my exam it was not off the charts good. It was not off the charts good, but it was pretty good. It was pretty good. So smug little third grader John, and you want to picture that, a third grader is about 8, 9 years old, comes home, slaps the test results on the table, says, "Mom, Dad, you see I'm doing pretty good." And this is what my dad said to me. He said, "Don't be too impressed with yourself. Both your parents went to college. 2 of your 4 grandparents went to college. They're native English speakers. You went to good schools. You hang around with ambitious people that gives you a high standard to match. You are competing against people that do not have all those advantages. John, do not be too impressed with yourself." Okay, so what my dad was talking about, we didn't use the jargon back then, but what my dad was talking about was privilege. That is privilege. Now, that is not white privilege, because Michael Jordan's children or the Obama's children could have all those same advantages and more than third grade John Goodman had. That's privilege, but it's not white privilege. Here's my story about white privilege. So I grew up in Denver, Colorado, and Denver, Colorado was the school district in Denver, Colorado was the subject of the first court-ordered desegregation of a public school system north of the Mason-Dixon line. It was the first, northern, if you will, court-ordered desegregation case. And that was implemented in around 1972 or so. And one of the flashpoints for the implementation of this was my high school. It was called George Washington High School in Denver, Colorado. But as a consequence of this, I went to a pretty integrated high school, about 50% Black students, about 50% white students. Remarkably, it's hard to even imagine this, but virtually no Latin, Hispanic kind of people. And of course, a smattering of other ethnicities, but not too many. So about 50-50. Now, within the school building, of course, there was a lot of segregation within the school building, but there were certain institutions that were within the school building that were very integrated. Black-white integrated. One of them, things like the choir, student council, cheerleaders, and certain sports, like the football team, like the baseball team. Now, if you knew me, you would know that I was not on the football team. I was not on the football team. But one of the institutions that was integrated was the track team. The track team was about 2/3 Black guys, 1/3 white guys. It wasn't perfectly integrated because most of the white guys on the track team were either discus throwers or shot putters or dweeby, skinny distance runners. That's me. And my high school track team was good. It was good. Now, Colorado is not as big as New York State, but we were 3rd in state. No, had nothing to do with me. Nothing, zero to do with me. But we were good. We had several people who won state championships on my high school track team. We had badass athletes on my football team. So here's what the story I'm relating to you is. There's a meet after we finished this meet that we had gone to on a school bus. We're coming back from the meet. This meet is someplace in suburban Denver. Maybe it's a 45-minute drive back to our high school. And somebody makes a decision, perhaps one of the coaches, I don't know how the decision was made, to stop at a convenience store, 7-Eleven, PDQ, some convenience store, so people could get off and get something to drink and snacks, etc. Now, in my high school track team, we had a hierarchy. And part of the hierarchy was that the people who were low on the totem pole, the dweeby, skinny, slow, worthless for scoring points at track meets distance runners, we sat in the back of the bus. And so I'm sitting in the back of the bus. We stop at this 7-Eleven. I stand up to get off the bus. And you know how these buses work. There's a center aisle. And none of the black guys are getting off the bus. They're kind of looking around and there's a sense I'm getting, and then it starts to be articulated that they are concerned that it's not safe for these 25 black kids to unload off a bus all at the same time in this suburban kind of environment. Well, I was the person then who I am now, a tad bit pushy, et cetera. And so what, from the back, what gives? Let's get off the bus. And then one of the black guys, says to the other, and somebody else, oh, that's a good idea. Let's let them get off the bus first. And what they were thinking in modern jargon, the terminology is now called signaling. And if you want to read more about signaling, there's a wonderful book about signaling. It's called Whistling Vivaldi. But signaling that this was a safe group. If the white guys got off first and then the black guys got off, then this was a mixed crowd and it was less likely to be trouble. That was a shocking experience to me. That was something that I could imagine happening in Georgia or Alabama or something like that. But really in Denver, Colorado, and that fear is not something you can fake. It was a genuine kind of thing. And that is my example of what white privilege is different. Had Michael Jordan's kids or the Obama's kids been on that bus, they might have had the same concern getting off it. And being able to get off that bus without the fear is an example of white privilege. All right, let me pause there and see if there's more to say about that. Any comments or anything, Marianne? I know this talk has this effect of like freezing people, like, oh my God, there's nothing I can say. It would be too incendiary to say anything. So that
we're good. You can continue.
Continue. Okay. Continue. Okay. This is not an unusual reaction. So now I am at the stage of the action item. An action item that I hope is relevant to the real estate arena. And I understand I have you about for another 15 minutes, and it will only take me about 5 minutes or so to explain this action item. And so I hope there are questions or comments so we can kick some of this stuff around. So here's what I think the action item is for real estate. I don't know your market out there, but everybody reads stories in the national press about how generally across the country, we are operating in a low inventory market for residential real estate. Lots of buyers chasing very few listings. And so one of the things that does is create this environment where buyers, partly to compete, are submitting offers with letters that are designed to appeal to the emotions of the seller. The jargon that we use is love letters. I can't see your faces, so I can't see you going like this. Yes, you're right, John, or no, you're not right, John. But out here, we call them love letters. And, a lot of these love letters do not have any fair housing ramifications at all. The buyer talks about how they love the beautiful gardens of the seller, and the buyer will strive to maintain the gardens as beautifully as the seller. Perhaps the love letter talks about the buyer loves the historical significance of the house. But oftentimes the love letters include pictures of the buyers, showing the beautiful, pristine family, the two kids and the dog. And sometimes the love letters talk about how wonderful it would be for the family to buy the house and have the kids walk to the same house as the seller's kids. I'm sorry, walk to the same school as the seller's kids walk to, etc. And one of the things that I know from talking to listing brokers is that love letters work. What happens is the seller might get 7 offers or 9 offers or 13 offers. And, typically those offers are initially sorted based on objective criteria. What price is obviously a big one, and the speed with which it closes, and the simplicity of the deal, and how late are the contingencies. The buyer has various due diligence contingencies. How quickly do those expire, and what's the loan to value ratio, and has the buyer submitted the offer with proof of funds, et cetera, et cetera. Oftentimes those offers are sorted down, and it doesn't happen every time, but it's not unusual for it to be sorted down so that the seller is making a choice between the 2 or 3 best offers. And what listing brokers tell me is that love letters are used to break the tie. Love letters are used to break the tie. And that sellers sometimes say, all right, let's go with this one. They are such a cute family. Now, I don't know. I can't read everybody's minds, and every situation is different. But a lot of times when people are saying they're such a cute family. Oh, by the way, one other thing to say is a lot of the times love letters are specifically designed to appeal to the seller. I'm like you, or I'm like you were when you bought this property 20, 30, 40 years ago. And, there's a natural inclination that all of us have to help people who are sort of on our team. As we're alums of different universities, we might have an inclination to help people who are alums of universities, or people who are in our social sphere, or people who go to the same church or synagogue that we go to. But what we don't realize is that the cumulative effect of us helping people who are like us works as a discrimination of people who are not like us, or in the jargon of the times, the other. And so one of the things, one of the action items is I can't really honestly suggest to you when you're working with buyers to not use love letters. I can't honestly suggest that the use of love letters creates fair housing risk for buyers. Fair housing laws are designed to protect buyers, not get buyers in trouble. So I'm not suggesting that the use of love letters enhances fair housing risks for buyers. I wish I could tell you of examples of cases where the use of love letters got sellers in trouble, and I might be blissfully ignorant of such cases. But from my experience practicing law, and I'm in the space a lot, and we've been dealing with a low inventory for a long time, I have yet to see a fair housing case turn on the use of a love letter or be initiated because of love letters. And let's be clear, I'm not concerned about discrimination against people who are submitting love letters. I'm concerned about people who feel that they would be disadvantaged about submitting love letters. But this is the action item, one action item for you as listing brokers. One of them is that when you do have those multiple offer information from the sellers, I am very much encouraging you, to the extent your regulator allows you to do so, to present the offers to the seller in a grid format. Each offer is a row in a grid, and then the columns in the grid, the fields in the grid, are what's the price, how much is the earnest money, what's the loan to value ratio, Has the offer been submitted with proof of funds? You can fill out the rows in the grid. So that this, and what's left off of the grid is the name of the buyer. Now, I realize that name does not always reveal gender. It does not always reveal ethnicity. It does not always reveal religion. I realize that, but oftentimes it does. Oftentimes it does, and those aren't supposed to be factors in making a decision. The two males who are buying reveals perhaps sexual orientation, gender. Most names are not gender neutral. There are certain names. The Denver Nuggets basketball team had a player who was named Chris Jackson, who later changed his name to Mahmoud Abdul Rauf. Omitting names might not have helped Chris Jackson buying a property, but it might have helped Mahmoud Abdul Rauf buying a property. So that's one of the things I encourage you to do, is present the information in that grid format. And I can tell you we have had one case where the listing broker did exactly that. There was a disgruntled buyer who offers was not accepted, brought a fair housing complaint, a regulatory complaint. It was investigated by the Division of Civil Rights, Colorado Division of Civil Rights. It was dismissed. When they dismiss a case, you say, thank you very much. You don't call them up and ask why. But one of the factors in this case was that the listing broker had presented the 15 or so offers in that grid format, omitting the name. And I would like to think that that was a factor in leading to the dismissal of that case. That's one thing. Okay, here's the second thing. That's something you can do right now. A second thing you can do right now is I don't want you to lose the listing over this, but if I'm a seller, I don't want to see those love letters. I don't want you to discourage offers from people who submit offers with love letters, but this is what I want my listing broker to do. I realize I'm a weird person. I'm not your typical seller, but I would want remarks in the MLS that say, seller has instructed listing broker not to pass on love letters. Please just get us your highest and best offer. And then I would instruct my listing broker not to pass the love letters on to me. I don't mind if they're submitted. But I don't want to see them. I want to be screened. I want to be screened from that. Okay, here's the third thing. And this is not something you can do right now. And it's very hard to compete for listings. And you don't want to use your leverage and clout to compete for listings. You don't want to burn it on this issue. But one of the things that I am working on, and some other people are working on, is a system in which buyers' names do not appear on offers. Again, it goes back to this screening concept. Buyers' names do not appear on offers. And this is not a hard thing to do. Most of you have been at charity galas where they have fundraising events, and oftentimes you register, you're assigned a bidding number, and that's how you bid for the items that are being auctioned off. This is how art auctions are run. It would not be hard in residential real estate. Buyers would register in the system. They would be assigned either a unique number or a QR code or a barcode or something like that. That would be, digitally stamped on the offers. And the sellers would not be burdened knowing the names. Now, this would not cure all fair housing problems. It would be easy to circumvent for the seller who is inclined to do so. The seller could have surveillance cameras. The sellers can talk to neighbors. The listing broker can talk to the buyer's lender. I'm not saying this will cure all problems. Also, names do not always reveal religion and ethnicity and gender and sexual orientation. I realize that. But I do think that it would help a lot, like that screening concept in the orchestra. And so I just bring it up to you right now, because if you see this coming, if you've had a chance to think about it in advance, the last time I presented this class, I presented it to lawyers. And lawyers are really really good about picking stuff apart and finding problems with stuff. I just bring it up to you now so that there's a greater chance you'll be open-minded when you hear it coming over the horizon. That is everything I wanted to say. I now leave it to Mary Ann to see if there's any questions or comments for me.
Sure. I mean, I just want to make one comment. I think we did a legal tip on this subject, but LIBOR strongly um, is against and teaches, against buyer love letters because of the fair housing implications it could have. So I just want to make that clear to anybody who's listening. I know you weren't advocating for it, but I just wanted to clarify that. And somebody does comment to say that their broker does not allow for it and Department of State strongly suggest against it. But we'll look and see if there's any other comments.
Okay, yes, and thank you for that clarification. And it's heartening to see that there's some institutional effort to try and discourage love letters.
We do have a question. It says buyers are being asked for COVID disclosures and frequently for prequels before appointments are made. Are you suggesting no names on those forms?
I haven't thought about that. So one of the, now I'm winging this, so give me some slack as I wing this. Sellers have a legitimate interest in knowing certain things about the buyer in before they go under contract. And for example, proof of funds. And so one, proof of funds for what we call cash due at closing. So in order for a system like this to work, there has to be some third party. And by the way, there's a possibility it could be the listing broker. This is a way that might keep brokers relevant and better able to make the value proposition. That the listing broker could be the buffer to verify things like COVID vaccination and more mundane things that will live on beyond the pandemic proof of funds.
Okay, I think that answers that. I'm really not seeing any more questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if I was an insecure person, I would attribute that to me boring you to death. I'm not an insecure person. I am a conceited person. And so instead I will attribute it to be somewhat of a hot potato kind of topic that people want to reflect on before they publicly comment on it. But Mary Ann, I very much appreciate you and LIBOR for inviting me to present on this topic.
Yes, thank you so much for being with us. Thought-provoking and interesting. And thank you so much.